February with a very special reading, an exclusive here on Kababayan Today. Ako po si G. Tanji, coming to you from Los Angeles, California. A new book is out. It's called The Latinos of Asia. Everybody needs to pick up a copy of this book because you will find yourself in these pages. Okay, so this is written by our guest today, si Dr. O. His name, full name, Anthony Christian Ocampo. Professor po siya ng sociology. And let's start off with a reading about Eagle Rock, his hometown.
So Frankie, one of the young men that I interviewed for this book, he's a banker from Eagle Rock. He said to me, "My Filipino-ness is rooted in Eagle Rock. Eagle Rock is what makes me Filipino."
Neighborhoods gave Filipinos ethnic authenticity. It was within these neighborhoods that Filipino children of immigrants learned what it meant to be Filipino.
And for the majority of Filipinos, most of these lessons about Filipino ethnic identity and culture started in the household.
All right, so let's talk about growing up in your household as a Filipino. How much did that play out in Eagle Rock?
Yeah. You know, I feel lucky because growing up, my house was always filled with other relatives. So ever since I was 6 years old, my grandmother lived there. She spoke Tagalog to me.
So marunong ka rin mag-Tagalog?
Nakakaintindi naman. But I have to practice more with the speaking.
Practice makes perfect.
Perfect.
Perfect ba? Hindi perfect?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was awesome because I had cousins that lived across the street. And so it was really easy to learn from people that actually lived in the Philippines what it meant to be a Filipino. But what was different, and I noticed this, and I talk about this in the book, is that unlike Chinese Americans or Vietnamese Americans, we don't have Filipino language schools, or we don't have Filipino Saturday lessons where we can learn about our history and our culture. And so most of this stuff happens in our households, at family parties, at church. And that's where people learn what it means to be Filipino and Filipino American.
Right, and it's so important to also be part of a community of other Filipino Americans. I know that there's a tendency to sort of isolate yourself. There are Filipinos that don't want to identify as being Filipino in America. They just want to, you know, no, I'm fine not being with other Filipinos. There is a stigma, and there are people that don't want to be a part of that. But guess what? When you discover your community, you are empowered.
Yes.
You understand your place in this world better. Don't you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And I noticed that when I talk to the Filipinos who grew up in a place like Eagle Rock or Carson or nowadays Daly City, they have this really, really deep-seated sense of pride in Filipino identity. And they notice with their cousins that grew up in places like the OC or other places where there's not a lot of Filipinos, it's just easier to try to assimilate with whites because that's what you learn where you grow up.
Right.
In Eagle Rock, Filipinos, the cool thing to be, the cool thing to do.
Exactly, because everywhere you went, you saw Filipino bakeries and Filipino stores, so it was easy to really grasp onto your culture and say, oo, I'm Filipino in Glendale, California.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, magbabalik kami here on Kababayan Today. We are still reading The Latinos of Asia. Get a copy if you haven't yet. It's available on Amazon. We'll be right back.